Medical school interview season is upon us. If you are anything like me, you are probably very nervous. But I bring good news. Those interview invites will come. I know there is this waiting period between submitting secondary applications and actually receiving invites, but I am here to tell you those invites will come. And when they do, you need to be ready. So in this video, we're going to get you there. Welcome back. My name is Wanu and I'm carrying you through my journey from aerospace engineering to medical school. I made a video about why I switched, then I made another one about how I switched. I think ideally, the next step in this series should be how I study for the MCAT. But the truth is I don't remember. It was 5 years ago for me. COVID was happening. To be completely honest, that whole time is a blur. So I can't really help you there. So we're gonna skip a step. We're gonna pretend like you've already taken the MCAT. You did great. You did very well on it. And now we're interviewing. So let's do that. In my last video, I talked about knowing your why. And this applies here too, because you will undoubtedly get the question, why medicine? I want to help people is a valid reason to want to be a doctor. But for interviews, that might just not be enough. When I spoke about medicine, I didn't just talk about it being a calling for me. I also spoke about my experience as a patient, having a heart surgery that should have been very, very scary, but having a doctor who explained things to me and calmed me down and made sure that I was comfortable. I spoke about being from Nigeria, a country where the healthcare system isn't the best, and my desire to one day contribute to that. I spoke about engineering and the fact that I had built so much for myself, and leaving that was difficult. So medicine was not something that I was doing on a whim. It was something I had really thought about. I would then wrap up my answers by saying that my volunteering and my shadowing and all my experiences in medicine had confirmed to me that this was indeed what I wanted to do. By the time I was done answering the question, my interviewer was sure that I had thought this through, and medicine was not something I was just doing on a whim. Once you know your why, you also have to know your application. Before your interview, reread your personal statement, your secondaries, your activity descriptions. Know your application like the back of your hand. Some interviewers have your application in front of them, and they'll ask you about things as they go through it. Inconsistencies will come across badly, so you want to make sure you're sure about everything you put down. And during the application, you won't have time to start scanning through things, so you need to be sure about everything that you have in there. Know why you included that activity in your application. What did you learn from it? And sometimes they may even ask you, how are you going to apply what you learned to your career as a doctor? So know how you might answer that too. I guess this is where I should say, do not add anything you are not comfortable talking about. Everything on that application is fair game. Don't just add an activity to fill up space. If you are not sure about it, if you don't have much to talk about, if you don't have much experience doing something, you can just leave it off. Aside from knowing your application inside out, it might be a good idea to group your experiences. While some interviews are not very structured and the interviewer just wants to get to know you, others might have very specific questions that they want to ask you. Some questions I remember being asked at least a couple times include, tell me about a time when you persevered. Tell me about a time when you went above and beyond for others. Tell me about a time when you needed to ask for help. And tell me about a time when you made a mistake. It's a good idea to group your experiences so that depending on what question you are asked, you have an idea of which one you might talk about. You might even be asked, tell me something interesting about yourself. For example, I have a friend who had a stellar application. He was previously an engineer, he had several research papers, he had excellent grades, but the one thing that consistently came up was the fact that he was a cheerleader in university. So you want to have interesting experiences. I love to bake, for example, and it's actually something that comes up a lot in interviews. Please note that when you're asked a question, it's okay to say, may I please have a moment to think about that? It's better to do that than to kind of rush pick something, start talking about it, and then realize, okay, wait, this may not be the best scenario. It's okay to pause, ask for a moment, take a few seconds to think about which experience you want to talk about, and then answer the question. After you've talked about one experience, if time permits, you can even add a second. For example, you might say, aside from that experience, there was also a time when, insert another experience, This gives some robustness to your answer. When you're done answering the question, you might also ask, does that answer your question? And that way, you might be able to gauge whether or not the interviewer is satisfied with what you've said, or if you need to add a little more. Okay, so now we know our applications inside out. We've grouped our experiences. I need you to remember that you have to be ready to talk about weak points in your application. For example, if on your transcript they see mostly A's and B's, and then a part of your transcript has a D or a C, they will most likely ask you about that class. Or say you had a semester that was particularly difficult, and your GPA from that semester is significantly lower than all your others, they will most likely ask you about that. Always speak from a place of growth. Instead of just talking about the problem or why you struggled, talk about what you learned from it. Did you learn how to better juggle work and school? Did you learn how to ask for help? Talk about how the experience positively impacted you, what you learned from it, and how it might even help you as a medical student and a doctor. If you have gaps in your application, you might have to speak about that too. For example, if you took a semester off school, they might ask you what you were doing during that time. If you needed the time to yourself, that's perfectly fine. You might just have to answer that question, and it might be uncomfortable for you, so you need to be prepared for that. Next, you need to know the school. You will most likely be asked why you want to go to that medical school, and you have to have a good answer. Is it the volunteering opportunities you might get? Is it the research opportunities you might get? Is it the fact that the school is in your hometown and you want to be closer to family? My school has a free clinic run by students and residents, and I have a friend who spoke about the fact that when she moved to the US, her family had to make use of free clinics, and so that meant something to her. You need to have your answer ready, because even if you have a good answer, but it takes you a while to respond, it comes across as an afterthought, and that doesn't come across well. Next, it is important that you practice out loud and not just in your head. I'll even ask you to take it one step further and record yourself. I know some people absolutely hate listening to themselves, hate watching themselves, but you're going to have to get over that, okay? This is really important because it helps you to identify your weaknesses as a speaker. Do you use a lot of filler words such as or like? Are you keeping eye contact when you speak, or do you scan the room and look at everyone but your interviewer? Does your voice start to shake when you get nervous or when you can't remember the detail of an experience? Or are you able to calm yourself, speak more slowly, and figure it out as you're talking? Are you speaking naturally? Are your words flowing? Or do you sound like you're reciting a chant? If recording yourself is taking it way too far, then at least try to practice in front of a mirror. You'll still get a feel of how you're doing and what kind of speaker you are. If you have access to mock interviews, perhaps through your school, or if you can afford to pay for mock interviews, then I would absolutely do that. Even if you don't have access to a professional to do a mock interview with you, doing a mock interview with a friend might also be helpful, because that way they can give you honest feedback. I never did professional mock interviews. I practiced in front of a mirror, I recorded myself, and I found that to be very helpful. The goal in this practice is not to memorize the perfect answer. It's more about sounding clear, natural, and genuine. The next thing to do is to research your interviewers. Many schools will send you the names of your interviewers a day or two before the interview. Where did they go to school? What's their specialty? What are their interests, their hobbies? Do they have a family? A lot of this information is typically on the school's website, so you should just go through their page, read up what you can. If you find that you have a few things in common with them, such as being from the same place, this might make your interview more interesting because you have other things to talk about. You can also look up research papers that they've written, and that way you can ask them about it. You can say, perhaps, I read a paper that you wrote and I was really interested in insert something that you read about. People typically love talking about their work, so if you're able to engage them in that way, it'll make you more memorable and help you stand out from the 50 other students that they're going to interview. Now on to my last but very important point. Remember that they're not just interviewing you, you are also interviewing them. You worked hard to get here, and you're allowed to be selective about what school you go to. I like to remind my mentees that it's not like the dean was walking through Walmart and was handing out flyers saying, hey, would you like to go to medical school? You went through the steps, you did the exams, you studied, you put in the application like everyone else. In the grand scheme of things, 4 years is not that long, but it's a pretty long time. And if you're going to be at an institution for that long, you have to make sure that it's a good fit for you. You also have to remember that this institution will be part of the foundation of the kind of doctor you will one day become. So you need to choose very wisely. For example, when speaking to faculty members, you can ask them, you've been at this school for 10 years. Why have you chosen to stay? When speaking to students, you can ask them, do you feel supported? What is your favorite and least favorite thing about your school? How often do you shadow? How do you get in touch with doctors? At my school, for example, it was very easy to shadow because you would email a doctor and more likely than not, they will respond to you and they'd be very happy to have you in their clinic or in the operating room. This is important because as you continue to explore specialties, you have to have access to these resources. You have to have access to the hospitals, to the clinic, to the different settings. So if you ask a student, how often do you shadow? And they can't really give you an answer, or you get the impression that it's difficult, that's something for you to consider. You can also ask students, what research projects have you done? If research is something that you're very passionate about, you want to go to an institution that values research. So if you feel as though the students may not get access to research, this is something that you want to consider. Speaking about support, supporting students is also something you can ask faculty members. For example, when I was applying, I was interested in a particular school, but then I found out that they lost access to their hospital. And as a 3rd or 4th year medical student, that must be a nightmare because you're in the middle of clerkships and now you have to essentially fend for yourself. You once had access to a hospital, but now you have to figure out where you're going to do your rotations. And so during my interview, when they asked me if I had any questions, I asked them, how did you support your students during that transition? If you're speaking to a dean, for example, you might ask them, in what ways do you feel your program might grow? Or, aside from what you spoke about during your presentation today, are there any other changes you're excited about? Of course, you won't learn everything about a program just by doing the interview. However, if there are any really big red flags, you might be able to identify them by asking these questions. So this brings me to the end of this video. I know that interviews can be daunting, they can be scary, but remember that if you've gotten to a point where you got an interview invite, they probably already like you and they just want to get to know you better. So be yourself, be confident, and have fun. I hope this video was helpful. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, ask questions, and if you know anyone who's applying, please send the video to them. Applying to med school is hard and we all need all the help that we can get. Also check out the description box in which I'll leave some links that might be helpful as you prepare for your interviews. Good luck.